And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hello there, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska aviation weather outlook for Tuesday and Wednesday. It is Monday, March 4th, 2024. And as we look at the situation here as we get into early Tuesday morning, we are expecting the ridge of high pressure that's been here over northwest Canada will continue to gradually weaken. It's still in place on this Monday, and we're having secondary low development along the east side of Kodiak Island in the western Gulf. But this system is going to drift northeastward by Tuesday morning, awaiting yet a secondary, more compact low that's lifting out of the North Pacific. That'll move into the Gulf, and eventually a frontal system will push up into the Panhandle by Wednesday. Otherwise, moisture that has come inland from a couple of frontal systems that worked its way in along the southwest and west coast over the weekend will continue to advance eastward with some areas of light snow, lower ceilings and visibilities all the way from along the spine of the Brooks Range through the middle upper Yukon, down across the Alaska Range, and then to the area of low pressure that's in the western Gulf, impacting areas along the eastern Kenai, extending eastward to just outside of Yakutat. By Tuesday afternoon, we still have IFR conditions lingering up there along the Brooks Range. Areas out toward the North Bering Sea. There is another low out here in the Bering. It will just gradually work its way eastward. Not a strong low, rather small system cut across St. Matthew and then into the lower Yukon, Etolan Strait area as we get into Wednesday. But IFR conditions are expected throughout the western, northern areas of the Gulf, including Kenai Coast, Prince William Sound, down into Kodiak Island and Shelikof Strait. And as we go through Wednesday morning, we see more widespread IFR conditions all along the Gulf Coast as this area of low pressure here kind of consolidates, and we have a front that'll be pushing into the Panhandle with some snow initially. We expect IFR conditions to try to push eastward there, and then up along still areas of the eastern Brooks Range to the Alaska-Canadian border, and then into areas of the southwest along the lower Yukon, as well as in and around the southeast side of Norton Sound, including St. Lawrence Island. And then for Wednesday afternoon, broad area of MVFR conditions across the mainland back into the Bering Sea, including the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutians. But here in the Gulf, widespread area of MVFR with IFR conditions with the snow areas that are pushing inland through the inner channels and the inner coastal mountains. We expect that then for Wednesday afternoon. So past conditions on Tuesday in the Brooks Range, a lot of IFR up there, Anaktuvik, as well as Adigan Pass will be dealing with some areas of mainly light snow, lower ceilings and visibilities at times. Lake Clark and Merrill on the western arm of the Alaska Range will generally be MVFR. There could be some IFR conditions, especially along the eastern entrances and toward the lower portion of Cook Inlet and the Shelikof Strait. Rainy Pass, we're looking at MVFR on Tuesday. Windy Pass, IFR becoming MVFR. And then as we go further east, Isabel, also IFR conditions expected Tuesday morning, giving way to MVFR. And then far end of the Alaska Range, Mentasta Pass should be MVFR becoming VFR for the afternoon. And as we drop down across the Copper River Basin, especially around Tanita Pass, IFR in the morning giving way to MVFR conditions. And Portage Pass, the typical split where you have IFR conditions, the eastern half of the pass out into Prince William Sound, whereas the western end, west entrance, is MVFR throughout the day. And finally, into the north end of the Panhandle, we expect VFR conditions to hold there at Chilkoot and White Passes on Tuesday. So freezing levels. The air is relatively cold across the state. We have the surface freezing line in through the central Bering Sea, dipping down into the middle Alaska Peninsula along Kodiak Island, and then up along the northwestern northern Gulf Coast, dipping back down toward Haida Gwaii. There is a bump a little bit, 2,000 and 4,000 feet aloft, but that's in the North Pacific, well south of the Gulf and the Alaska Peninsula. But that's also a hint of this next low that's going to be working its way out of the North Pacific up into the Gulf as we get into later Tuesday and on Wednesday. So where we have moisture lingering from the initial fronts that pushed inland over the weekend, we have that remnant moisture now working its way east across the interior. So we expect Moderate icing possible in some of the clouds and precipitation producing clouds from the Brooks Range, middle upper Yukon, crossing the Alaska Range, and then here and through the Gulf above 3,000 feet, above 5,000 feet further south as you get south of Kodiak Island there in the North Pacific, and then pockets back out here toward that other little smaller low that's going to work its way across St. Matthew. We could see some pockets of moderate icing above 2,000 feet. The upper level jet stream winds 30,000 feet, generally a southwest flow here over the southern portion of the mainland, but rather light, 35, 50 knots. The real jet course way south in the North Pacific, well south of Kodiak Island and the Alaska Peninsula, where we have max winds 75 to 95 knots. At 9,000 feet or 700 millibars, with the low pressure in the western Gulf, we find the strongest winds in the mid-levels south of that low center. 50 to 65 knot winds just south of the Gulf in the North Pacific. And then back to the west, we have some 40 knot winds near and south of St. Matthew, and then an area of southerly winds pulling up into the western half of the Aleutians, 40 to 55 knots. And then at 3,000 feet, here's low circulation in the western Gulf. We're waiting another system to catch up with that, but we could see some locally stronger winds around a frontal boundary along the north central Gulf Coast, 45 to 50 knots. Also here south of the low center, lower Gulf into the North Pacific. There's that other low back out here towards St. Matthew, west winds upwards, west-northwest winds to 45 knots, and then behind me we have another low with winds 35 to as high as 50 knots coming up in there toward the western Aleutians. And this translates to the greatest threat for moderate turbulence along areas of the northern northwestern Gulf, back toward the entrance of Cook Inlet to Shelikof Strait, surface to 4,000 feet. There are some locally stronger winds coming off here along the northwest Arctic coast between Utqiagvik and Point Lay, surface to 3,000 feet, and then back here in through the western half of the Aleutians. We expect some moderate turbulence, surface to 3,000 feet on Tuesday.